Hello and welcome to a video that I'm very excited. This is not my list. This was a user, a player, user, however you want to pronounce, however you want to refer to them as, called Voidrix, who played this in the Core Constructed event at Axion, only dropping one game to, I believe, a Circle of Life deck. And the player as well, I knew that player, but I believe they very high world, played very well, but from then on out managed to win out for the rest of the day and finish around top 8, I believe. I don't actually know the official standing, but I did see the matchups and it seemed like they went through the test with this deck, and before that they'd been testing and they tested their locals, and they tested in some of the Sapphire Steel chats and discords that I'm very grateful to be in. But altogether I really love the list, utilizing a lot of the cards that Kiwi has basically been always asking for, things like Nala, that I always said if we ever got this aggressive 2-drop quester, we'd be like, if we basically got a Piglet, we would be very good. That's pretty good. And we also got a 1-drop that quests for 2, and like I said, I've always said back when I was playing Kiwi a lot in set 6, if we ever got a 1-drop quester that's really aggressive, that would be great as well. Maybe it could have some flavor for it, but you know, the Sultan's not bad either, just being a 2-quester 1-drop. But all these cards come together, really awesome list, really awesome to see someone still playing the archetype of Kiwi in set 10. And it doesn't stray too far away from the Kiwi sort of style and what we're trying to achieve with the deck, with the Alice and giving a bodyguard ward. We actually even got some slight improvements, and I'm going to go through the deck. Like I say, shout out to Voidrix if you can find him on Twitter. I believe that's his Twitter username. If you need any more questions, any more stuff about the list, please do reach out, and hopefully he'll respond. If he doesn't respond, then I'm really sorry about shouting him out and saying go find him out. But awesome. And so I knew about this list from the weekend when it was played, got in contact very early, and I've just been playing it in different testing environments until Friday, and then I thought I'd do a video on it. These are all my opinions, my takes on the list. They can, of course, the creator of the list might be a bit different, but this is how I've been approaching it, and I've been really liking it. I think it's still pretty good. It's very cool to see that Kiwi does work in set 10, and you get to use a ton of new cards as well, which is always fun. You know, it feels bad when a deck just gets no support, but there is so much support for this deck running around. And I'll go through the deck. I think in set 10, the way Kiwi is it's another aggro deck to put on the pile of aggro decks. I think it utilizes Pete probably the best out of all of them. It feels like Amber Steel, as an aggro deck, it's fallen quite far behind. It didn't really get any support besides any of the Rapunzel stuff, and you know, we have so much good targeted removal now with Thunderbolt. Even Headless Horseman and Ruby Amethyst is very strong. And on top of that, you know, just Elsa, Demona exerting things is rough, and I'll talk about Demona actually as well. But it just feels like we got enough removal now that playing this sort of build your board aggro deck quest for 12 lore in 1 turn is very hard to achieve. The only deck that really can achieve that right now, that's sort of getting really good results, is Dogs, because they have things like Mowgli and Ursula where they can take some of these proactive cards out of your hand. But Kiwi also always had that amazing thing that it can just give everything ward. So your removal option that's in your hand is now a dead card, and if it's an uninkable like Thunderbolt, that's a very dead card in my opinion. And I just think it's really quite powerful for that. You know, when we look past things like Under the Sea being the big board wipe of the set, there's so much other things that just come to that kind of make this whole thing very awkward. Make removal and make aggro decks very awkward is what I'm trying to say here. Is Thunderbolt, and is Strength for the Raging Fire, is the Elsa to exert and rush in, is the Headless Horseman in Ruby Amethyst as well. All those cards are just kind of really awkward for us to play around. On top of that, they can at any point do a board wipe with green decks. So a lot of the other aggro decks are struggling. Like I say, Dogs has this aspect, but Kiwi's ward has been very useful. And I'll talk through the cards that I think are just really worth noting. First off is the Sultan. I think it's quite cool that we got a 1-drop quester, the quest for 2. I'm going to say that's really good card, really cool support. There is, though, the likely chance that it maybe doesn't stick around. If you haven't counted the number yet, there is 20 uninkables in this deck, and something that Kiwi was always pretty good at was you just mulliganed for a straight curve for a 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes you're going to get in a spot where, you know, you're going to mulligan for the curve, but you're going to make sure that you don't draw too many uninkables, and it kind of changes up the mulligan game a little bit. So I could see maybe the Sultan being the less impactful of the new cards, and maybe not making it into a final version that I'd be playing at a CCQ or something like that. But it's still a very good card. It's still great that we get a lot of lore pressure from 1. If you're playing into green-blue, a lot of those decks, as long as they don't TPO or put something on the board, or even blue-steel, you know, you just get a bunch of lore from it, and later on in the game, you top deck 2 lore, which is great. But going into that, and then you've got Ichabod Crane, Bot Crane, I think is how we pronounce that correctly. I'm probably got that wrong, but just really good. And if you remember the way that Kiwi worked, it was this aggro deck where it started off with this really strong curve, this really strong 1, 2, 3, 4. And then from there, it was hoping to just play big bombs every turn. And we've got a nice little array of big characters to be playing down there. And again, I'm going to cover Goliath because I think that's a really cool addition to the deck. But what he allows you to do is he's going to quest for 2 lore. The minute he is dealt with, you can now have, you're inked 1 closer to your 5 and 6 drops, and you can play more 6 drops if you run this card. He has felt really good. Again, the issue I've had with it in testing is that we're running 20 uninkables. He can sometimes clog up a hand if we draw a couple. It can be kind of rough to be running that card, but altogether, he does allow us to run things like Goliath and Jafar. And also, if we have a good curve and we don't want to ink the cards in our hand, quest with him, he gets banished, then we play just our curve and we don't have to ink for that turn. He's very useful. He's probably the exact card we'd have wanted for Kiwi. Maybe a bit more tuned, maybe a bit more that he could fight back, maybe a 2/2. Maybe he was a 1-drop and his stats would look a little bit differently, but altogether he's really a card that the Kiwi deck has wanted. So Nala came out in the last set, but I think I played Nala in like side events for Infinity side events, and every opener that I went Nala, Alice, Pluto was just backbreaking from my opponent. They couldn't do anything, and by the time they could, I was too high a lore, and then it was like top deck award card and I just win the game. So Nala and just been a really good addition to the deck, really awesome to see in there. And Thurgus McDuck, I think the inkable additions to the deck have just been very valid, and it's very hard for you to say I'm going to take them out because the majority of the time in testing you're going to be inking them. Fergus McDuck's been one of them. I think he kind of reads like here's free 2 lore, or here's ward your Nala, or here's whatever you want him to, because the ward is so good. Him being a 3/2 stat line is not great, but he also quests for 2, so another 3-drop that is really quite a lot of lore, which just you're surprised how useful it is. Before, it was like if we didn't play Alice on 3, we kind of lacked a bit of lore. We tried things like Wendy Darling in older editions, but Fergus McDuck was just seems like a really great addition. Again, I don't think you need to run him at I think as well the 3 count is probably fine for it. I don't think you need to run him at a 4x, but just having another ward thing on 3 that's not Alice is pretty good, and it being inkable is pretty good. Maybe you keep a Fergus in the mulligan and then you end up finding an Alice. You can now ink the Fergus and play the Alice, which is awesome. John Silver is just like my favorite card. No, don't need to talk too much about that. I was going to go card by card, and then I realized I'm talking about all the new cards. This is just too much excitement for Kiwi. Just really been enjoying the deck as well. Especially we've been playing a lot of Purple Steel and other meta decks, but just been fun to play the deck that I know and love. We're going to the next new card then, on that tangent of my love affair for Kiwi. Going into the 3-drop, which is Zeus, and I think this is the one that he has got it at a 2 count. I did ask why is this in here? This is probably the most interesting card. We don't see it, but outside of Cheshire Cat, we don't see a lot of boost cards really end up getting any play. But he said it's there for the Purple Steel matchup, and to be honest with you, yeah, ending up getting that 4/5 out is pretty good, pretty impactful. He's either going to quest for 2, he's going to be a rumbler for you, he's going to be able to sing strength for you, or just boost them up and then trade and, like I say, be a rumbler, and 4/5 is a good stat line. And a lot of Kiwi is about basically playing good stat line characters. Of course, boost does make him a bit awkward. Maybe your turn 4 is going to be boost and play a 2-drop. Might be a bit interesting, that factor, but it's been a pretty useful card. I think it's probably another one of the ones that could be going, but because it's inkable, I think it stays around, and it's just not bad having that 3-drop spot lined up. I think is where we can learn a lot from the way that Purple Steel mulligans is. If we have heavy amounts of 3-drops, we don't ever have to keep a 3-drop. We can send them back. Alice is probably the most impactful one, but like I say, I've been bigging up Fergus, giving ward, and we've got another 2 quests there as well. So we can send the Alice's back looking for a stronger curve of 1, 2, 3, 4, which I think is pretty great. Going into the next one, which actually I think generally might be the most impactful card of the deck, is Headless Horseman. And I like that it's a 4x put right next to a 3x. And by the way, this is just the list he ran at Axion. Since then, we've been tinkering, we've been trying new cards, and he's tried a lot more. It's his list. He's been playing a lot more than I have, but putting in a few different things to try out. But the fact that Pluto is at a 3x and Headless Horseman's at a 4x, I think is probably going to stay as a ratio, and it's pretty valid as well, because Headless Horseman ends up being a lot more that... stumbling on my words here of excitement. Headless Horseman is a better card than Pluto in a large amount of scenarios, because what happens with Pluto is they generally just run their 1-drop in and then they run their next character in, and you only take out a 1-drop. Headless Horseman adds them crazy maths. You know, if you play against Purple Steel and they've gone Hook into Calhoun into White Rose, let's say, or Pete, or whatever it is, now they're going to have to still sacrifice 2 characters because it's got Ward from the Alice. They have to run them in. The maths are still weird. Then they still can't even take out the Alice. It's just really good value there. Just for the fact that its strength doesn't go down once it's been hit is the point I'm trying to make. Pluto is still very good. I think giving you the more consistent route of you're going to play this 3-drop into this bodyguard character just really works. You know, Alice into Pluto, Alice into Headless Horseman. Headless Horseman probably hasn't replaced Pluto, but like I say, you just get it really consistently. Headless Horseman doing the job a lot better than Pluto has been doing, especially in my testing. Also as well, if you look at the deck, if you look from, you know, characters 1 to 2, we don't really fight for the board very much here. That's all very weak health characters. 3, we get some 3/3s, we get Zeus as well. But once you get to the 4s, you know, you're playing these big characters that can rumble, and, you know, 4 is quite a magic number right now to take out a lot of other things and trade up. And if you're just saying, actually, I don't want to trade up because I'm going to get my lore first, and I'm going to Quest of Alice, give it Ward, and then say you have to trade up, and you have to do really awkward trades, and say if you sing Strength as well to make the board even more awkward, it's just all round been very impactful. And I think as well, I can't remember in the conversation that Voidrix said that sort of maybe, or Justin or someone said that it was one of the cards to make us look at Kiwi again. It's that impactful. So the Headless Horseman's really been a game changer for the deck. Having another good bodyguard, one that arguably is better in a lot of scenarios than Pluto is, just a great card. And we'll talk about the last new card as well, because there's a few different interesting cards in here, like the 6-drop Jafar, pretty cool. But I think it's Goliath is also as well, in my opinion. I think it has to be played as maybe a 3x. I don't think maybe a 4x, because, you know, we want expensive big cards to top deck in the end as we do, and just play them once a turn. But it's still just, it could be still 3 copies of it because it's still quite expensive. But when it works, it's amazing. You do this really strong curve. You know, you say you play your 1-2 Alice and then Ward a bodyguard, whatever you do on 5, or say you've got Ichabod that died as well, or banished, not died, was banished. Now you're jumping to that 6 ink. You play this Goliath down. You establish a 6/5 that quests for 2. You refill your hand. If they don't deal with it, you refill your hand, and you know the deck is a bit more weighted towards big characters anyway. So every turn you're going to be playing like a Gantu, maybe ink a card, draw 2 more cards, or and you get to a point when maybe you can double spell and play a Gantu, and then you can also play a Nala as well. And it's just really, for my opinion, it's just bringing the whole deck together. The deck always really struggled with card draw. Doc was like just run because it was the only card that we could fit into the deck that said draw some cards. But Goliath as well does a very good job of that. And also topping off at the end being this huge character that if they remove it, you still draw your 2 cards at the end of that turn. They remove it, but, you know, they're going to have to put a lot into that. And if you give it Ward as well, they can't even remove it. You know, and you've got Fergus and you've got Alice Quest, give it Ward. You can do all these awesome things, and it just feels great to play Kiwi in that way again. So yeah, I feel Goliath and Headless Horseman are 2 most impactful in the deck. Ichabod Crane has been really good as well, and just Sultan being more aggressive questers is awesome. And you look in there, you've got the 6-drop Jafar. That's how greedy you can sort of get with the Ichabod. And I also think as well how much ink you're getting from Goliath. You know, once you get to Goliath, you can ink your entire hand, play your entire curve out, get to Goliath, refill the 2 cards, then keep playing the game. And it doesn't feel that bad that you've got no cards in hand at that point. Awesome deck, awesome loads of stuff in there. Now I'll talk about like I guess the negatives, because I don't want to sell you a dream that this is perfect. I think it does have, this is not going to instantly go and knock off all the top decks of the format, but I still think it's very good. And if you like Kiwi, this is definitely one to play and sleeve up or play on your simulators or whatever it is you'd like to do. The negatives of it, I think matchup wise, you know, we don't have any locations anymore. I should cover locations before I cover the matchups. Locations wise, we used to use McDuck Manor, but the reason why we used that was because Be Prepared was around. Be Prepared's not around anymore. I still would like McDuck Manor. I still like the idea of splitting threats. We don't really have any locations that do the job that did at 9 health, which is just bonkers. You know, we can put Dwarf's Mines in, we can try a few other cards, but they're just not going to be on the same level as this. There's Castle Wyvern, which could be pretty cool. You could try that in there, but overall, you just like that 9 health thing of, you know, here's a strong curve, and here's also a thing they're going to get me 2 lore a turn unless you deal 9 damage to it. So that's just really powerful. But as I say, the main use of McDuck mana was things like once they B-prep the board, you slam the manas down and you create an even more awkward board state. We don't have that anymore. Matchup wise, like just locations, I think just fine. We just ignore them. We can use the space in the deck now, which is great. If we go into matchup wise, it's fairly, you can play some solitaire gaming with a lot of these decks. You know, you're just building up your board and saying, do your awkward trades, and I'm going to keep slamming big characters down. Looking at the first one, like green-blue, feels pretty good into it. Sometimes you're so quick, you don't even care about the Under the Seas. And by that point, you know, they're going to Under the Sea, your Alice, your Ichabod or Crane, whatever. That might have gained you enough lore, giving you a ward, and then you're just going to get over the line with like Gantus and probably Goliath, and maybe even just peat the board so they can't even do any of that. You know, it feels pretty fine. You're pretty aggressive into that. Blurple as well. If Blurple's still roaming around, it's pretty good into that. It feels pretty strong. Into dogs, I feel like once you get past that early stage, you're just going to be playing big characters down, and maybe you're going to be getting enough lore that you're so far ahead that they can't do an Under the Sea full quest turn. You know, you're just going to be so far ahead. It doesn't feel too bad into pretty much most of the field. It feels pretty good into. I'm not going to say it feels amazing. There's one matchup I'm trying to not mention that's lurking around, but I will mention it right at the end of this. I'm going to mention it after I've talked about all the other matchups. Green-blue, yeah, it doesn't feel too bad into. Sapphire Steel, I think you feel great into. No one's really running Spooky Sight anymore. And if they are, it doesn't feel too bad anyway, because you maybe get value off their Goliath, or you play your own Goliath. Everything has wards, so they're Hades, Vincenzo's. Everything, like Tinkerbell's even more awkward to use, especially if you put ward on like something that has bodyguard and then it has the hit there, then it can't even put the damage on the Alice. It's just great. It's just all great. That matchup feels great as well. You know, green blue, all the Sapphire matchups feel pretty good. You know, take away their big board wipey cards like Spooky Sight and Under the Sea. They've all got a lot of target based removal, and it's very hard for them to utilize it. And even if they do, you just end up playing big characters like Gantu every turn and just spam a Gantus on the board. Awesome. They all feel fine into the Sapphire matchups. They're kind of the matchups you want to see. Into like the green purples and stuff. You know, the decks that they're also like trying to set up a Prince Philip thing and try and do all this stuff. You're going to be given ward. You've just been turning sideways. You could even peat it if you ever get to that point. You know, there's loads of stuff there. It's pretty good into that, I think, as well. I think as well, into a lot of these combo-y decks, you're a bit more consistent than them. You know, you're just trying to curve out and just aggressively gain lore, whilst they're trying to get their combo pieces set up. Feels pretty good into them. Like I say, Amber Steel, Dogs, doesn't feel too bad into them either. You're both aggro decks. It sometimes just feels a bit toxic, those matchups anyway, but you've got a lot of big bodies and you've got a lot of ways to gain lore very, very quickly. The matchup that I think is really rough, and probably one of the reasons that might scare you off the deck, I don't think Amethyst Steel is that good. It's kind of Amethyst Steel is that deck right now that you always get in every card game, where it's just fundamentally very good mid-range building. You know, it's going to stomp all the aggro decks, and it's probably going to be aggressive enough against the control decks as well. That's what it aims to do. Before in Kiwi, the thing that we used to have was you could curve this board out, and then you could play Cogsworth, then you could full quest and say all of your trades are a lot less value. That's very hard to do now. For starters, we don't have Cogsworth anymore. We can try cards like the what's it called? There's a Daisy Duck that gives all your Sapphire cards resist +1, but even still, that card doesn't have wards, so it can be targeted or removed. And on top of that, if your bodyguards, Pluto and Headless Horseman, won't have the resist +1 anyway. So, and they're the cards that you want to have it. So, kind of a bit rough there. I wouldn't look at that. And on top of that, just every character's body's just got bigger. Like, we can play Pluto into Headless Horseman, or, you know, Pluto might even be better in that scenario, but the thing is they've got loads of little bodies lurking around. But Headless Horseman, if they've played a Lexington, they just get this 1-1 trade. And to be honest with you, their 1-1 trade is with a 3 cost into a 4 cost, so they actually get advantage on that trade as well, unless you can strength it, which is the only thing. But then if you strength it, it means you haven't probably quested Alice to give it ward, and yeah, it just can feel rough. The Amethyst Steel matchup can feel fairly rough. I do not think it's unwinnable. I think cards like Zeus is pretty fun because you can boost and get this 4/5. You can sing strength. You could just be quicker than them. You know, say if I'm giving this scenario where they draw Lexington, which is like, you know, they run 4 copies, they might not get it out. They might play a 3/3 on that turn, or they might play something else like Cheshire Cat, which is a 3/4. You know, you can still win that matchup. On the draw, it feels really rough, but on the play, you can sort of be aggressive enough, and a well-timed strength into just playing big characters every turn could win you the game. But again, it feels like this deck is very, very good. It's very, very viable, but I can't lie and say the Amethyst matchup's that good. I think as well, when trying to test it and improve it, things to improve are the Amethyst matchup. And looking at things like taking the Sultan out to maybe put some more control-y things on the board as well. Maybe Ichabod a Crane out to put in some sort of 3/3 character, maybe Calhoun or the Black Heron, which is something we tried and it ended up just being a vanilla that's not very impactful anyway. So don't try the Black Heron. We've tested that one, it didn't really work. But besides that matchup, everything else seems very good. You can play Kiwi the same way it is, and Ward is generally for some players a bit more of a headache than the Chromicon maths is, but overall the deck just feels great. I think if you want to start playing that style of deck again, the Ward aggressive deck, please pick this up, please have a look at it, and shout out to Voidrix because this was just a real masterpiece and it's been a real joy to play again.